Now, let's move on to selling, general, and administrative (SG&A) expenses, a critical component of VF Corporation's financials. SG&A expenses include a variety of costs necessary to run the business effectively. These cover product development, selling, marketing, advertising, retail operations, warehousing, shipping, and administrative expenses. For example, in 2014, VF Corporation spent $713.7 million on advertising, including cooperative advertising payments to its customers. Additionally, shipping and handling costs for delivering products totaled $309.9 million, while royalty-related expenses added another $13.2 million. In 2014, VF Corporation's total SG&A expenses were $4.2 billion, which made up 33.8% of their $12.3 billion total revenue. This percentage shows that their SG&A expenses were not only stable, but also well below our investment-grade threshold of 80%. In 2015, VF Corporation reported selling, general, and administrative (SG&A) expenses of $4.2 billion, closely aligned with the previous year's figure. With total revenue at $12.4 billion, SG&A expenses accounted for approximately 33.8% of revenue, maintaining a consistent ratio year over year. This stability highlights VF Corporation's strong operational discipline as they manage to keep their SG&A costs proportional to revenue growth. Such control ensures the company remains adaptable to changes in sales, a key factor in achieving investment-grade status. In 2016, VF Corporation's selling, general, and administrative expenses increased slightly to $4.2 billion, despite a decline in total revenue to $12 billion. This brought the SG&A to revenue ratio to approximately 35.3%, a modest rise from the previous year's 33.8%. The increase in this ratio reflects the impact of declining revenue on cost efficiency. However, SG&A expenses remained well below the 80% threshold. In 2017, VF Corporation's selling, general, and administrative (SG&A) expenses rose to $4.5 billion, while total revenue declined slightly to $11.8 billion. This brought the SG&A to revenue ratio to approximately 37.8%, reflecting a noticeable increase compared to the previous years. However, these expenses still remained below the 80% threshold. For the year ended March 2019, VF Corporation's selling, general, and administrative expenses increased to $5.3 billion, alongside a significant growth in net revenues to $13.8 billion. This resulted in an SG&A to revenue ratio of approximately 38.6%, marking a slight rise from previous years. Despite the uptick, the ratio remains comfortably below the 80% threshold. For the year ended March 2020, VF Corporation's selling, general, and administrative (SG&A) expenses were $4.5 billion, with net revenues at $10.5 billion. This brought the SG&A to revenue ratio to approximately 43.4%, reflecting a significant rise compared to prior years. While the percentage increased, the company's SG&A expenses remained well managed and far below the 80% threshold. For the fiscal year ended March 2021, VF Corporation reported selling, general, and administrative (SG&A) expenses of $4.2 billion, with net revenues totaling $9.2 billion. This resulted in an SG&A to revenue ratio of approximately 45.9%, a slight increase compared to the previous year's 43.4%. The higher ratio reflects the ongoing impact of lower revenues on cost efficiency, possibly due to external pressures such as global disruptions. Despite this, VF Corporation demonstrated effective cost management, maintaining SG&A expenses within an acceptable range and far below the 80% benchmark. For the fiscal year ended March 2022, VF Corporation's selling, general, and administrative (SG&A) expenses increased to $4.8 billion, while net revenues rose to $11.8 billion. This brought the SG&A to revenue ratio to approximately 40.7%, marking a notable improvement compared to the prior 2 years. For the fiscal year ended March 2023, VF Corporation reported selling, general, and administrative (SG&A) expenses of $5 billion, with net revenues at $11.6 billion. This resulted in an SG&A to revenue ratio of approximately 43.3%, showing a slight increase compared to the previous year's 40.7%. For the fiscal year ended March 2024, VF Corporation's selling, general, and administrative (SG&A) expenses were $5 billion, while net revenues stood at $10.5 billion. This yielded an SG&A to revenue ratio of approximately 47.5%, reflecting a notable rise from the previous year's 43.3%. VF Corporation's SG&A expenses remain within a manageable range and well below the 80% threshold, demonstrating the company's cost discipline even during periods of financial pressure. Now, as we wrap up our analysis of selling, general, and administrative expenses, it's worth noting that depreciation and amortization expenses are included in both COGS and SG&A expenses. In our next video, we'll take a closer look at impairment of goodwill and intangible assets to better understand its role in VF Corporation's financials. Don't forget to check the description for links to other videos in this series. See you soon!